Hey guys, it's me Simo Orahara, and in this video we will talk about one of KUBO'S answers. As you know guys, in the last weeks most of the questions KUBO has been answering haven't carried significant value, and some of them have been quite trivial. It's hard to believe that someone has the opportunity to ask good questions and yet chooses to ask about things like Neil and how she can bathe with the mask on her face. Can you imagine that guys? Or other similar topics. To the extent that I started to believe that the people running the site Club Outside might be doing this deliberately, placing an important question among dozens of ordinary or trivial questions. Or some of them are simply being ignored. And I'm speaking here about the important questions. So, if we're talking about important questions, one of the fans asked KUBO about the incident where the Bankai was stolen from the captains using the medallion. As you know guys, that event was one of the key factors that made the Van der Reich superior to the Shinigami. The Shinigami thought that the Van der Reich had sealed Sasakabe's Bankai and never considered the possibility that it was stolen. And this fact was learned by the Shinigami in the hard way when the four captains had their Bankai stolen. I'm speaking about Byakuya, Toshiro, Kumamura, and Soifon. And as a result, every Shinigami with a Bankai refrained from using it for fear of it being stolen. Because it wasn't just about the Bankai being stolen, but also using its powers. Byakuya was defeated using the Senbon Zakara Kageyoshi and was almost killed by his own Bankai's power. However guys, the most prominent example that can illustrate what exactly happened is what happened with Toshiro. When his Bankai was stolen, he could no longer feel anything from his Zanpakuto. He said, "I don't feel anything," and tried to communicate with the Hyurimon, but to no avail. It was as if the soul of the Zanpakuto in his sword was gone, stolen and now inside the medallion. But the strange thing here is that Toshiro was still able to use the Zanpakuto's power through the Shikai. And this specific point raised questions about how that was possible, especially since we know that the power of the Shikai and Bankai belong to the same Zanpakuto. And based on this incident guys, this fan asked the question, assuming the Shinigami capable of using Bankai are naturally able to use Shikai without the need for the Zanpakuto's soul. And he gave the example of what happened in the Zanpakuto Rebellion arc. Those who watched that filler arc know that Muramasa was able to control the soul of the Shinigami Zanpakuto and make them manifest outside the inside world of the Zanpakuto and also follow him. Thus, the Shinigami swords were empty of the Zanpakuto's soul and therefore its power. For example, some Shinigami like Kira who do not have Bankai were fighting with their sealed sword, like in this scene. We see how Kira was fighting Kazushini using his sword with Sankido. Therefore, this fan assumes that since those who were able to use Bankai were able to use Shikai, this also applies to what happened in the Quincy arc or 1000-year World War arc. Those who had their Bankai stolen were able to use Shikai with their own power and did not need the Bankai's power or the Zanpakuto's power itself. So this was the fan's theory, and KUBO almost gave the same answer with some clarifications. He said that Shikai is the state where the Shinigami's power is reflected in the sword, while Bankai is the development and manifestation of the souls born in the sword. Of course, I don't know if KUBO means soul by ego, but it appeared to me that ego means the Zanpakuto's soul. And now guys, let's discuss KUBO's answer. From what I understand from KUBO's words, he says that in Shikai, the Shinigami reflects their power within the sword, fighting with their internal power. I'm not sure if this applies only in the cases where the Zanpakuto's soul is absent or if it's a general rule in all cases, whether the Zanpakuto's soul is present or not. Because as we know, if it were that simple for the Shinigami to reflect their power within the sword and fight, there wouldn't be difficulties in knowing the Zanpakuto's name and the need to communicate with the Zanpakuto to strengthen their bond, like what happened with Ichigo and White during his fight against Zaraki. But I can understand it from another perspective, which is that in Shikai, the Shinigami uses their power within the sword and is capable of using all the capabilities and all the abilities they learned in Shikai with their Zanpakuto spirit. But I can understand it from another perspective, which is that in Shikai, the Shinigami uses their power within the sword and is capable of using all the abilities they learned in Shikai with their Zanpakuto soul. Especially since we have seen some Shinigami who could activate the basic power of the Zanpakuto without even needing needing to awaken the Shikai. I'm talking about Toshiro himself when he was a child. As we saw in Toshiro's flashback, when he was young, he emitted cold Ryatsu without knowing it. Or as Hirschfeld said about Yamamoto, that his Ryatsu emanates in the form of flames, which is the basic power of Ryujin Jakka Zanpakuto. And unlike Bankai, Kubo said that the Zanpakuto spirit in Bankai can develop and manifest. Perhaps the example that explains this is Kyoraku's Bankai. Of course, we won't consider what was mentioned in the Zanpakuto Rebellion filler, but what was mentioned in the manga. When Kyoraku fought with his Shikai, he fought without Ohana appearing beside him. But when he raised the Bankai, that's when Ohana appeared. And from Ohana and Kyoraku's conversation, we can sense that it has been a long time since they last met in that form. And this could explain Kubo's statement that the Zanpakuto in the Bankai form develops and manifests. And I think there is another case as well, which is the case of the 8th Kinpachi. When he returned to Shikai, his Zanpakuto Nozarashi Uruzakuru, which was in constant state of Bankai, disappeared and his sword became like katana or asaochi, and this further emphasizes that Bankai is indeed the true power of the Zanpakuto, as its initial name was, I think, Shunichi, meaning the true sword or something like that. And unfortunately, we don't have many scenes depicting the relationship between Zanpakuto and Shinigami in the manga. To have a clear idea about the issue concerning Shikai and Bankai, we only have scenes of Ohana with Kyoraku, Yachiro with Zaraki, though this relationship is complex and has some elements outside the norm. And we have also Zangetsu, who is also unusual, and he shares powers with the Quincy power. I'm talking about the old man, the Osan. But the idea that the Shinigami can fight with Shikai using their own power makes me think about the past. How did the Shinigami fight without Zanpakuto then? Did they have the ability to release their power in another form, or were they unable to do so? And the Zanpakuto invented by Nimaya enabled them to do so through Shikai and Bankai. And one last thing I wish they had asked Kubo about is the Bankai of the dead Shinigami. From what I understand from Kubo, the Quincy stole the soul of the Zanpakuto, which includes the Bankai. So how could the power of the Bankai still work while its true power is dead? The prominent example we have is Sasakibe's Bankai. The skull was able to use the Bankai without any problem, although it was not strong as it used to be, as Yamamoto mentioned. So this raises several interesting questions about the mechanics of Bankai and Zanpakuto. Does the Zanpakuto soul retain some of its power even after the Shinigami's death? Is there any kind of connection that allows the soul in Bankai to function under the control of a Quincy? So understanding this wouldn't only deepen our knowledge of the relationship between the Shinigami and their Zanpakuto, but also shed light on the limitations and potential of Bankai when separated from its original owner. So guys, what do you think about all of this, about Kubo's answer, about this topic in general, and see you guys in my next video.